some cases, the ends justify the means. It's instances like this where the most get-it-done actions are performed and get overlooked or waived. However, one-time actions slowly turn into the new normal, which can spell disaster if it continues to be practiced. No operation is worth continually glossing over procedures. This is Shady Fixes.
What's the old saying? If you can't duck it.
Chuck it in the bucket.
Yeah, I think that's it.
Yeah,
That's
yeah.
the PG version.
Close enough,
That's
right?
the PG version.
Close enough.
Yeah, it's just speed tape it back together. It'll be fine.
Absolutely.
Just for this flight, just to meet the mission, and then 6 months later, when you go back on deployment and that thing's still taped together, and you're like, glad we ultimately fixed that by adding more speed tape.
Weird. It's got like five or so layers of it.
I mean, seriously, like you'll peel it off, and you're like, oh. What? No, come on. Like after like 3 layers, and you're like, come on, somebody should have done this.
Right?
Should have been a red flag.
Red flag galore. But like you're saying, like let's do it this one time just turns into an all the time thing.
Yep.
And we were saying earlier, like in some cases, very slim cases, the ends do justify the means. You know, like whatever, just get it out of here. It's more expensive to keep it here, so let's just patch it up just enough to get it up out of here, so we never have to deal with it ever again.
Or it's one of those, hey, we got troops in the ground, they're in distress. Get this Overwatch bird going. It's got air support. It needs to do. Yeah, whatever you got to do to get that thing in the air, tape the tail boom on for all I care. Like, just get it going, you know?
Right.
But then like you say, then every time after, like, well, this is what you did before, just do it again. Yeah, but we're not in a rush right now. Why?
Right.
Well, but it'll save time and money if we do it that way. Okay, sure, but
And it can cost you a lot
it
of
can
money
cost
too.
you a lot too. Like it's a temporary fix. It's not. It's why aircraft aren't glued together. They're riveted. You know, most of them. Or
Right.
whatever else. It's. But yeah, like you said, it just becomes the new norm.
Right. Then you get like the demanding parties where they're like, but it's temporary enough.
Right.
Yeah, close enough.
Close enough.
Close enough in horseshoes and hand grenades.
Yeah.
And then you get those who are just so enthusiastic, like, we're never going to get funding for this. Just do what you got to do because it is what it is. I can't begin to tell you guys how much of a pet peeve that is for me.
Well, think about from our past that we had those birds that were doing testing. Just make it work enough to get this one test flight done, and then it's going to sit in the hangar for 6 months.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, yeah, but why not just fix it right now? And then when it goes in the hangar for 6 months, it's sitting there with no discrepancies. It's there, you know?
Right.
But then it always goes by the wayside. And then 6 months later, like, hey, we need to test this again. Well, hey, actually, we got to fix this first. Where did this come from? You're like, oh my God.
Well, it's like from 6 months ago when we first brought it up, maybe.
Remember when I told you, let's
perhaps?
pull back. Let's. Well, there's nothing in the logbook. Did you go through the pulled forms? Well, no. Wait a minute.
Why would you pull the forms?
Why would you pull the forms with an open discrepancy?
Oh!
Because I don't know my job very well.
Oh man, that goes into like what we were saying like some time ago about having to explain your job to other people who just don't understand. Like, come on now, man. Like you know this doesn't happen overnight, and if it does, it's probably wrong.
Yeah. You ever notice though that most of the shady fixes are actually procedural fixes? It's not actual maintenance being done on the aircraft itself. It's always a procedural maintenance. Like, oh man, we hit this roadblock, so let's dogleg it and go around that, and then keep on going.
Right.
But then one shady fix stacks on top of another, like the duct tape, the speed tape I was talking about earlier. It just starts layering upon itself, and then you don't know which way to go anymore.
Right.
It's spaghetti. It's trying to.
That's pretty much what it is. It's like a spaghetti diagram. Just, I don't know what I'm reading, but let's just roll with it anyway. Screw it.
Yeah.
Screw it. And I think that a lot of that goes into, matter of fact, MVP, you said it about procedures where it doesn't match up to what the actual work is. So we're just like, well, let's just do it and ask for forgiveness later.
Or it's one of those, hey, we have this problem. We need to fix it. We don't have any parts on site to do that, though, so we're going to have to order them. It's probably going to take 2 weeks to get here. And then you get that one person in the corner, oh, I think we have a way around it. Well, what way around it?
Mm-hmm.
Like the manual says it has to be fixed this way. So what's your way around it?
And how often do you use
And
it?
how often do you use that way around it? Because it sounds like
You sound pretty versed in this, friend.
sound pretty yeah.
It sounds like this happens way too often.
Yeah, and but then they never tell you actually what the way around it is, and so everybody's just like, cool, thumbs up, moving on with our lives, on to the next talking point, and you're like, well, actually no, I want to know what that fix is.
Right,
Like why, if it's better than if we use it more than once, it sounds like we do. Why aren't we doing manual updates or TO changes or whatever you want to say?
Mm-hmm.
And that's our new procedure, because it sounds like our existing procedure is antiquated. Our existing way to do it is antiquated, and there's a better one.
Yeah.
Well, but that's too much work to get all that stuff changed. So we just like to look the other way, right, while this gets done.
Right. Or did you see some that would get real shifty in the eyes? I'm like, oh, we can do it, but we can only do it on second shift or night shift. You know?
We'll have thirds do it. Why thirds? Aren't they supposed to be prepping for the flight the next day? Well, we'll start it on seconds, and then we'll have thirds finish. And you're like,
Well, that's code speak for we need you to leave because we don't want to be held liable for it.
Right.
And then, and if it goes south, we can always point the finger at those people saying you were doing something illegal.
Mm-hmm.
Like, so you tell your people to do something illegal, and then if it does go wrong, you're going to hang them out to dry.
Yeah, that's fucked.
Get out of my head.
Stop it. Oh man. So I've done a shady fix. I mean, I'm pretty sure all of us have, but some of them, it's not really fixing anything. It's more like a good to have kind of fix. Like for instance, this was on a Cobra. One of the pilot's glare shield cracked, and so we had to take it off. It takes a little too long for it to cure and repair, but they need it for a flight. So we just got a cardboard box, cut it to the shape of the glare shield, and then stuck it on with duct tape. And then the pilot just looked at us like, what the hell? There's your glare shield, friend. It does what it needs to do. It keeps the sunlight out of the gauges. What more do you want?
Yeah.
I had that for a drawer in a galley on a corporate jet.
Yeah.
And the latches wouldn't stay closed. And I'm like, I need to order new latches, and then, remove the drawer, install these latches or whatever else. And they're like, that's going to take too long to get. Just tape it shut. And then the next day the aircrew comes in like, this isn't fixed. You just put tape over. I'm like, look, that's what maintenance control wanted done. They said you were more than capable of reapplying tape if you needed to get in that drawer. You know what I mean? Just don't open it when you're on a bank.
It's not flight critical. Just roll it.
Right. Yeah. Now you were talking about the glare shield. So I had one in a cockpit once where they're like, we'll just take the one from the co-pilot side and put it on the pilot side, because the pilot's one was the one that was messed up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, well, what about the co-pilot? Like, well, they're the co-pilot. They can deal with it. And I was like, well, what happens if something with the pilot? It'll be fine. They'll just have to work through it. Okay.
It's going to take it off and shuffle it around mid-flight. Quick.
Or you just tape on another piece of cardboard that's extended way over here.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. But like you're saying, man, like some of those, it's not flight critical. No one really cares, but it's one of those that just need to happen. Like gluing things back in place when it really should just be replaced. But whatever. Who cares?
Right.
It's a windscreen seal or a weather stripping. No one gives a shit.
Or yeah, you Hysol a screw in that really doesn't take Hysol. Good luck to the next guy.
Right. So now we're going into the shady fixes, right?
Yeah.
A lot of it is with O-rings, especially, or packings.
Oh,
man, O-rings, man, they get dicked up so damn much. I mean, I can't even tell you. It gets girded up so easy.
Well, yeah, they get put in and they get flattened, right?
Yep.
So because when the two units are compressed together, or the two units are bolted together, compresses that O-ring, which creates a seal, which is what it's supposed to do. But then that seal work hardens into a more flat shape.
Mm-hmm.
But then you go to replace that, you pull the units apart. And as we all know, we're supposed to replace O-rings every time. So says the manual. But then you find yourself in a middle of nowhere location with parts not readily available, and you kind of just want to go home because it's been a 100-hour week.
Mm-hmm.
And you're like, the seal's not torn.
It's healthy
it'll
enough.
probably work if
It's
I just
seasoned. Yeah.
if I just add a little more O-ring lube to it, it should be fine. And
It is.
it's fine. Nothing ever happens, right? No leaks, no whatever else.
Right.
But it's not right.
It's
and
not
you
right.
know that when you're doing it, but it's still not right.
Right. And that goes into the ends justify the means. But then you get some other ones where same O-rings where they go to install it and they gird it up so bad, like they pinch it, they rip it, whatever the case may be. It happens, especially when it comes to stuff like fuel. It gets girded up so freaking easy. But it's one of those that has to fly, that has to go. So the next shady fixes is you take like sealant or liquid shims, shim it up in there and then press it real tight while it's still wet and then let it dry.
Yeah. Yep. And then the next guy to go take it off and they're like, this should just fall right.
It's just seized in.
And you come out 3 hours later and they're there with like the largest screwdriver and crowbar from the toolbox and they're like, oh,
Like,
just
what?
leaning against it, you know, like
Then here comes the great white shark of QA, right? Like, what are you doing?
why the hell are you using that tool to get that component off?
Like, what are you going to do with that?
It's not a sealed component. You're right, Mr. QA. I don't know why it's not coming off though. And so they end up having to take off the component that's in front of it, right? From like let's say the gearbox, the AGB. And then they sends it to the back shop and the back shop ultimately breaks them apart. And you're like, this shit was literally glued together with Pro Seal. And you're like, who did this job? But guess what? That person never wrote that job up in the logbook.
Like, oh man,
Because they knew.
all sorts of wrong.
It is all sorts of wrong, but now there's not a finger to point at. And like, well, I guess we'll just install the new parts and move on with our lives. And you're like, yep. But somewhere down the road, there's somewhere is the maintainer who did that job. I'm like, please, dear God, I hope nobody finds out it was me.
Which is a lot of times. Charlotte, I'm sure you guys did a lot of shady stuff to make things work, especially in the live, make this happen now or you lose your job kind of environment.
Oh man. Yeah, I mean, most of the time it's just like, if some feeder has come and it's got a slice in it somewhere or something like that, it's a bunch of E-tape and just trying to make it so it's not super unsafe, but, workable. And when it goes back to the shop, hopefully it gets fixed. But then, 6 months later, you pull that same cable out and it's still got that same E-tape on it. And you're like, well, we have to make it work for this show too. So peel that tape off, put new tape on it, and it just repeats itself. As far as super shady fixes, less fixes and more. I've been in some pretty shady rigging situations where you have to hang stuff from places it's not supposed to get hung, and like having to be a structural engineer when you're not a structural engineer.
Oh my God.
You're like, I hope this holds. I really do.
That kind of brings me back to the whole Jurassic Park thing. We're like, well, we're not supposed to bring back dinosaurs, but here we are.
Yeah.
What could go wrong?
Yeah. Or using truss that isn't rated for as much weight as it's probably carrying.
Oh, let me tell you
scary.
about using stuff to hoist things that are not rated for.
Oh man, yeah, I got some of those.
Yeah, I have one. So this one was fun. We had a motor burn out when we were trying to hang a PA, and it's a 2-point hang. And we usually use 2 1-ton motors, one front, one back. And the one at the back had burnt out.
Ooh.
And it was like day of show. So we had to make something work. So we used a 1/2-ton chain pull on the back. And this is not light. And luckily it was the back that burned out because the front was the one carrying all the weight. It's carrying about 70 to 80% of the weight. But you have the front, which is an electric motor that goes straight up and down. Mm-hmm. And then you have a chain pull motor, which if anybody's used chain pull motors, when you pull it has a tendency to swing if the front side's lifted as well. Mm-hmm. That's exactly what would happen. So you'd go up a few feet with the front motor and then you'd have to chain pull and it would just be swinging. And this is over somebody's head swinging. So, but finally got it up in the air and it was fine. But man, it was not a fun adventure getting it up there.
No.
No, not at all.
Another shady fix that I can think of is like, say you're working in in some sort of bay on the aircraft, right? And you're in there changing a hydro pump or something like that, or not a hydro pump, thinking of like a Phenom 300. There was a panel on the back and it had these springs that controlled rudder and stuff, and one of the springs had collapsed. But go to put the panel back on, and when you took it out, you stripped out one of the fasteners, the heads, and you don't have any replacements, or you have one that's a little too long or a little too short, and maybe a slightly different thread pitch, and you can get like the first two started, and you're kind of like, all right. That's
exactly what I was saying.
And you just hammer that thing in there. It's like, well, it's not coming off now.
Let's go, Ooga Dooga.
And then a real maintainer keeps a notebook on them that has the tail number, and they're like, God, I hope I don't have to work on that one again. Yeah, that's another one is random hardware that's not the correct hardware, but I think a lot of people would be surprised to know how many aircraft are flying with incorrect hardware. Now, chances of it failing, right? Because it's still all PMA, right? It's still all certified hardware. It's just not the correct one for that specific location.
Right.
Or how about you don't have a screw at all, and so you fill the actual screw hole with Hysol. Like hopefully nobody will notice.
You get someone who's really artistic who kind of draws it to look like a screw too.
You okay? So I saw this though. Some people thought it was because it was
someone actually did that.
The Pro Seal was black, right?
Yeah.
And then they had one of those silver Sharpies. And after it dried, they colored over top of the Hysol, like they trimmed out around it, so it's just the little black dot, like the head of the screw. And they silver Sharpied over it, and then black Sharpied like the little lines in it for
That is awesome.
like a Phillips head.
Yeah.
So from a distance, you're like walking around, you're like, okay, everything's there and whatever. And then how it was discovered, like somebody else went and worked on the plane. You're like, what the? Like, they had to get in there and like, where the hell did this come from?
Like, why is this all soft?
Yeah. So they're sitting there. They're sitting there with like picks and shit, trying to get the Pro Seal out of there and like trying to dissolve it with MEK and whatever else. Like, damn it, cursing whoever was on. And they went through, like, you go through the book. You're like, you're so pissed off. You go through the book, like, who the fuck was in there before me? God damn it, no, I'm gonna find them. And then you find out it was you. You're like, I hate me.
Damn you, past me.
You're such a piece of shit, older me.
Oh man. And then the best part about Shady Fixes is when the customer or the demanding individual like waives it or buys it off. He said like, yeah, well, this is not the right way, but he'll get it done. And then the signing or waiving authority is like, yeah, sure, whatever, do it.
Oh man, I've worked for some people that they would waive anything. Like, hey, the drag link, we cracked the little, like, we used to have a problem with the stresses on the landing. It would crack the these like lock collars on the drag links, and like, we need to replace these. But it's not a really common thing to break. But we just had a bad batch of them hit the field, and so they would crack after one flight. And so we started looking at them like, these are cracked, and that particular customer was like, yeah, okay, but what are the chances of it? Like, what's the worst that can happen if it cracks and falls off? I mean, these two nuts could loosen up. I'm like, okay, well, we're willing to take that risk. And I was like, okay. I was like, are you sure? And they're like, well, what can you do to make it work? And I was like, I can maybe try to stop drill it and Pro Seal the shit out of it. Very well. Do that. I was like,
Yeah.
okay.
Like, can you sign this real quick?
I was like, I'm just going to need this. But they would anything, like, they got so used to it. They were just like, you need a waiver for that? And I'm like, if you would. And they're like,
Yeah, sure.
there you go. Sign their John Hancock. And I had a book like that of all the waivers. Like, it was thicker than the actual manual of the waivers we had.
Wow.
Imagine like how much of a headache that would be when you're looking through the procedures, like this, okay, this, and this, and then you go to the waiver manual, like, well, don't got to worry about that no more. Don't worry about this.
They would even waive like overtemps, engine overtemps.
Wow.
Because, more often than not, you might overtemp it by 20 degrees. Typically everything's going to be fine in there. And once the customer learns that, they're kind of like, well, if it's typically fine, just did you do a follow on and just start it up again? But yeah, we just did everything's operating as normal. Great. Put it in the air and you're like, all right.
Okay.
But you
What
know,
did we say, Coach?
like we've said so many times today, but it all comes down to that dollar sign because it's like, well, I could pull the motor and send it back, which is the right way to do, but that's going to cost me, including the replacement engine, that's going to be about 15 mil.
Mhm.
Or they ops check it and it's operating as it should right now. Let's just waive that and move on with our lives. Because again, the dollar drives everything.
Right. I do have a
Even
question.
some shady fixes.
Yeah, I've got a question for you. So, a little off topic. You mentioned getting a bad batch of parts, and I can speak on that. I'm curious on how often it happens to you guys. It doesn't happen very often in my industry, but for instance, we had fly bars, which is what the speaker's attached to go up in the air, and we did an install somewhere, and this company had just put their manufacturing into a different country, and they had a bad batch of these fly bars. And so we did an install. It was up in the air for a few days, and the welds gave out completely. Luckily, it was prior to opening. Nobody was in where this was installed. Definitely part of that company's problem, but what it was a change in manufacturing and a bad batch of fly bars that ended up going out and recalled and all that. But so what is that for? Is that often?
It
for you
happens.
guys,
It
or?
happens more often than you care to admit. It happens quite a bit,
Okay.
and it might just be right. It might be a component that the manufacturer of that component changed a vendor of theirs who makes an internal part to that. Something we as the maintainers would never, ever, ever change. It would always have to go back for depot level, and then they would rip that thing apart and get down to that tiny little piece that's way inside of there.
Gotcha.
But that one little component starts, and so then we get it to them like, hey, this component one after the other keeps failing. What the hell's going on?
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to the manufacturer. The manufacturer's like, I don't know, like we haven't changed anything.
Right.
And you keep pressing them about it, and they're like, oh, actually, we did change a vendor for this. And you're like, oh, okay. And so then they have to do a case study on it, like the manufacturer, and they have to do a claim against their new vendor and figure out what changed in the process to make it. But yeah, it happens more than you care to admit.
Mm-hmm.
Gotcha.
I guess the good thing about aviation is you said that the welds gave out and everything came crashing down. At least for most things in aviation, or at least on the aircraft, there's redundancy systems.
Right.
So if one gives out, you got a backup to fall on. But you kind of want that when you're at 30,000 feet.
Yeah.
And some of those failed parts or bad parts, their tolerance is like just off by like a small amount, you know, like real small, but it's just enough for it to be considered bad.
Right.
You also have ones where they were good when you took it out, you send it for its overhaul or whatever have you, and it comes back bad. You know, when they do the rework to it, and it's just what they girded.
Yeah,
up
you took it
somehow.
off for a high time, right? It hit its limit on service hours, and you send it back, and you get that component back, and it just flops right away. Like I had a starter gen on a Phenom 300 once, and it grenaded itself in flight. And you look back at it, and it just came back from overhaul. So it's got to go the back shop somewhere. They're the ones who've got to answer for that. Like what the hell happened? You know.
Mm-hmm. Some of the more shady, straight up illegal fixes I've seen for parts and reworks like that is they know the parts failed, but there's not going to be a replacement, so they'll scratch off the serial numbers or redo the history to say that it's okay enough, and then send it back for you to install it. Now that is like some straight up, not even shady. That's in the black.
Yeah. That is
So-
don't do that.
Well, so and to add to that, right? There's a big problem in the corporate realm of when a part gets pulled for high time, right? Because those models of aircraft are all over the world, different countries own them, whatever else. But there's a problem when the part gets pulled for high time, and it, instead of going for depot, it gets sold to some country in South America so say that part is a $5,000 part, they'll sell it to some place in South America for $2,000. But that part wasn't overhauled. It was high time. They'll go down there, and it might work for a little while, and then ultimately it's going to kill itself, and then you're going to have catastrophic failure. So that's been a big problem. I know probably 5 or 6 years ago, there was a lot of investigation and stuff going on. A lot of companies were getting investigated to see where their parts go. Like once I would pull it off in the field and ship it back to the their headquarters or whatever else, and then from there, their parts department would disperse it to whoever the manufacturer of that component was for overhaul, depot level maintenance. But there's such a big money in that, though.
Absolutely.
Like you would get a lot of these mom and pop shops all over the country, small places, and they would pull high time parts off and then sell them to Central and South America or Africa or wherever else, or Southeast Asia.
Whoever was willing to buy it.
Whoever was willing to buy it, really. But a lot of the places were second, third world places that don't have a lot of money, but they're buying parts for, and so the people selling were making, it was just straight profit.
Yeah. It's crazy.
Yep.
Or
because they've already made their money on it when they sent it to you guys, and now it's a high time item. So now it gets,
and some parts are end of life, right? They hit so many hours, completely done, can never be used again. There's no overhaul that goes with it. And those are the big ones that are so like, say I would get it, I would do all the work, and I'm pulling that part off, putting on a new part, and I have this out of end of life cycled component. Well, what I typically would do is scrap it, whatever else, just waste metal or something at that point. But then I would sell it to them, and if the part's 5,000 brand new, here, I'll give it to you for 2. Cool. Yeah. And it's a straight profit. So that's a uber big no. That's a extreme shady fix. If you're covered by the FAA, you're going to get hammered hard. But beyond them, you're probably going to be dealing with the FBI. So anyways, that's one of the biggest things that I've ever seen or heard of.
That's crazy.
Is for ultimate shady fixes, is taking end of life components and selling them to a foreign entity, and then they install them on theirs, and then massive catastrophic failures.
Yeah.
But it's in another country, so it's kind of one of those out of sight, out of mind.
Right.
I don't.
And then a lot of companies, especially or organizations, don't have like such real strict scrap it policies. Like as soon as it goes bad or as soon as it's identified as bad, they have this whole like chain of event to get rid of it because of reasons like that.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
Like I think I mentioned in one of our episodes, we returned the drive shafts into mugs or beer cans and whatnot. And before that, we would just toss them in the trash, or like you'll like gouge a giant hole in it.
Yeah, so that's one thing we had to do with certain components like that. So like we would have to actually do physical damage to the part to where it couldn't even be fixed, right?
Mm-hmm.
Like you would take the housing and you had like a big punch and a hammer, and you would just smash right into a certain spot, and it would crack the housing.
Yep.
So it couldn't even be reused. And then when you submitted the paperwork to the customer, because you were in the field somewhere, they had to witness that crack in the housing to know that, like, you had to submit all the serial numbers like you typically would, but you had to show that picture where there was a physical damage to that old component.
Like clearly this cannot be used anymore.
Right.
And then you see it in another aircraft with that same hole or crack, and like, wait a minute.
because and that's for their records, because let's say that serial number of component showed up somewhere else as a that serial number showed up in a country on an aircraft that crashed, right? And they're going to say that they traced it back to you for some reason. They're going to say, hey, you sold this part because it killed people, whatever else. You're now responsible. But you can say, no, look, here's the serial number. Here's the physical damage. Somebody fudged a serial number someplace else, right? So ultimately, a lot of them probably don't ever get resolved because happens in a foreign country and whatever else. But yeah, it's CYA for them.
Absolutely.
For the operator.
And then we were talking a little bit about the waivers, like, the customer's willing to waive this, or the waiver authority is willing to waive this. Sometimes that's not even written down anywhere. They're just like, give you their thumbs up, like, go for it, do it. I'm like, okay. And I've seen a lot of cases of this where the executive management or the project management were like, well, customer says he's cool with it. I'm like, yeah, cool, but how do I sign this off? I can't take your word of mouth and just say, okay, the customer told me to.
Customer verbally gave verbal approval of waiving of rights of whatever else, or to use this component.
And there's usually like a control number or something like that, some kind of document that says this, I'm allowed to do this.
So like even when you would go to put an item on MEL or minimum equipment list, right? So it's not right. It's an out of tolerance situation, but it's not flight critical. You can fly it for a specific amount of time. There's a whole MEL procedure and MEL number that's associated with that. So you still have to write it up and provide the MEL number that can only be given to you by control
Mm-hmm.
from that owner operator of that aircraft, right? So you have to call in, and then they'll generate the number in their system, however they have it set up, and they'll give that to you over the phone, and you have to write that number in there, and that's how you would sign. Added to equipment list per MEL number such and such,
Right.
and that's how you're covered on your end as the maintainer to
Right.
legally MEL that, because it's an MEL list, and you can tell them like, hey, control, this is an actual MEL item. I don't have the parts to replace it right now. We can MEL it and fix it at a later time, or I can wait for parts, whatever you want to do.
Mm-hmm.
And oftentimes they'll go, all right, cool, let's MEL it, but stand by while I generate
Right.
because they're going to need all the part numbers and serial numbers for you to input in their database and whatever else.
Right. And then when you go to the ones where they don't have some kind of control number or documentation number, so you'll get a lot of individuals who are just like, yeah, well, the customer says he's cool with it, and then he like really tries to drive it to you to do what needs to get done. I'm like, this doesn't sound right. This can't.
Well, and a lot of, especially younger guys in the field, they'll say, oh, well, they told me it was okay. I'm like, okay, but where's it in writing that it's okay? Because when it comes, when the fire gets put under their ass, they're going to hang you out to dry immediately. I never said that. Prove where I said it. Prove that I gave you the approval to do what you did. And you're like,
Exactly.
I can't.
Yeah.
So oftentimes when people are like, yeah, it's fine, I'll just get you the paperwork at a later date. That's cool. I'll be on standby until I receive the paper. I'm going on work stoppage until then. And you have to. Sometimes you have to stand your ground in situations like that as a maintainer, because you got to protect yourself.
Right.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because once you lose that license, man, it ain't coming back.
Nope. And then that same waiver authority, if it's just given to you by like word of mouth, sometimes that's done so often or so much, it just turns into some type of tribal knowledge where like it's just instantly understood that they'll buy off on it, and everyone just continues doing it until they get challenged. Where's your authority? Where's your document number? Where's your control? Whatever. And like, well, this is how we've always done it.
Yeah, so you've always been wrong then. That's cool. But what are we doing now? Like, who are you? You can't tell us what to do. And then ultimately, like in you and I's case, we've gotten told to shut up and color. And you're like, okay, but it's known. So then you send an email and they're like, what are you doing? You put everybody on blast. Like, I just want it known.
I want it in writing.
I wanted it in writing that I said, I brought up this issue, and I got a response that said, as per our discussion earlier today, we're going to skip that and do this.
Yeah. Or how many examples have we had with that? Charlotte and I can tell you one almost exactly like this, where this was on a plane where they want us to install a part on a position that has no written procedures for it whatsoever. And the process owner's like, do it. And I'm like, well, how? I don't have any procedures or documents or anything to tell me how to do it. I mean, I can physically do it, but I don't have anything to tell me that I did it right. And the process owner or project manager kept on really pushing it. And it came down to where like I had to like send an email notification to basically everybody, like, per our conversation, you want me to do this and install it here, even though I have zero procedures for it, and you're willing to say that's okay. Is this correct? And then instant reply, yes, do it. If they have any questions, call me. And then within 3 minutes, Quality's like, no, that is not what we're going to do. This is completely wrong. You need to come see me.
Yeah, come to my office immediately.
Right?
For discussion.
But imagine, if nobody pumped the brakes on that, they would install that the wrong way. And
so I brought up situations like that too. And like, well, we don't have procedure for that to do that here on that component. I'm like, very well. Do we have the component manual though? Because I'm pretty sure every component on an aircraft has its own separate manual, right? The manufacturer has their own manual, and it might tell you to this is how you install or clock the certain component or whatever as you install it. And the aircraft manual just might be very vague with it, which is why, at least on the corporate side of things, we had access to component manuals, to IPBs, to drawings, to the actual aircraft manual. Like, we had access to all those things. So if it didn't say it in the manual, all right, well, let me go to that component to see if it tells me in there, because oftentimes it would.
Right.
So I asked for that in one of our past situations. Like, what? What's a component manual? Like, oh, come on, you guys. Like, what are we?
For real?
Really? Like,
yeah.
But they're like, no, we're not. Just do it. I'm like, give me an email.
Yeah.
Yeah.
How many times do we do it? Give me an email.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. And then I'm like, cool, got the email. And then still not really happy with that result, but at least it takes the pressure off of us and off the actual guys on the floor. And we can say, okay, look, we're going to do it. And the guys on the floor are like, this isn't right. And you're like, yep, I know. But here's the email saying that they've given the approval. And you're like, okay, moving on.
Whatever you say, coach.
Yeah, whatever you want to do. You're taking full responsibility at that point.
Right.
Well, and like Six was saying, it's just protecting that maintainer from ultimately being hung out to dry, you know,
Because it's going to happen. I've seen it more often than I care to admit.
You're low man on that totem pole, you know. Even if whether you're the younger guy or the older guy, or the lower on the totem
And when
pole.
I see a leader or management or CO or whatever you want to call them, when I see them give that kind of approval without any question, their credibility to me plummets.
Absolutely.
I mean, it's done. I'm like, okay, I had some respect for you, but now I see you're willing to just do whatever it takes so you look good on your end.
Yeah. That comes into like the number fudging and all that stuff too. Well, we can go on forever on that one.
I'm like, well, I'd hate to see your taxes because I'm sure there's some illegal shit on
yeah,
it.
no shit.
Right.
Well, yeah, and it's like you're saving $1, but you're putting somebody's life in danger, you know?
Yeah,
At the end of the day.
and it's not their life, so they don't care.
Exactly.
It would be me with an A&P license that's at risk of losing that license.
Yeah.
To them, they're like,
Yeah, they're willing to sacrifice your license for their $1.
they're like, that dollar is worth more than you, so we can replace you if we lose you. And
Right.
Yeah. Right.
And unfortunately, many organizations operate on that. You're all replaceable. Yeah, but the knowledge isn't. Well, we can train them up. And you're like, I don't care.
Right.
No, I don't care about the person.
Yeah, and that's a shame. And I recommend if you work for a company like that, continuing to put in resumes.
Right.
You know?
Put in resumes or fight it to the end.
Yeah.
And fight it, and then if they ultimately terminate, you can say, so you terminated me for trying to do things the right way. And then you have lawsuit material. Not saying go around suing everybody, but like, again,
Hold people accountable.
hold people accountable. But again, if it comes down to you losing your license and your ability to work, you know, because an A&P is just a license to work. That's all it is.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, you gotta take care of number one.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And then that goes especially onto like this is how we've always done it, or that tribal knowledge of this is how we've always done it. Something or another is wrong in that whole line of logic. I would call that, if you can say that, logic. But that kind of mentality needs to get nipped in the ass like immediately. And it's either the procedure's wrong, we need to fix it, or if the mindset is wrong, we need to fix it. Because if we keep on doing this and continue this cycle of shady fixes, one way or another, the band-aids are going to fall off, and then all the bullshit, this is going to come crashing down.
Yeah, to me, that tribal knowledge, or only I can know this and not disseminate it to other people, is a major aspect of poor leadership.
Mm-hmm.
You are so incapable of leading your personnel properly that you have to withhold information from your team.
Yep.
So you can somehow justify your valuability. That's not even a word. Justify yourself to the organization as I'm important and I'm necessary here.
Right. We're not adding we're not value added. We're just reappropriating the value. You know, we're taking the one from you and putting it to someone else.
Right. And then you build no credibility with your team. And then they just get that every time they run into an issue. I don't know. Go ask them, see what they want to do.
Right. And I see that way too often, man.
Dude, way too often. It just kills people's will to try, to actually to learn more about the system, to troubleshooting skills. I didn't pick up on my troubleshooting skills till 8 years into working in aviation, because the place that I worked didn't put any value on troubleshooting components. You know, they said, well, I don't know. I think it's this. And you're like, well, I think it's this, and I'm your boss, so we're going to do that. And you're like, just
shotgunning parts.
Yeah, just shut it down. You're like, okay. And then after a while, after 3 or 4 times, people go, hey, it didn't start. What do you want us to do? Whereas if I was that lead, I'd be like, well, what have you done so far? Well, I don't know. It just didn't start. Okay. Well, how about you troubleshoot a little bit and come to me with, hey, it wouldn't start, but I tried these, and this, and it still wouldn't go. Okay, cool. Let's dig into it a little bit further. It's one of those, how many times we said, come to me with a problem, but no solution.
Yeah, I think that's probably like my biggest pet peeve of all time.
Yeah.
gents, people listening, is anyone can point out a problem. Shit, my dog can point out a problem, but you know it really can. I'm telling you. But it's another thing to provide a solution, and I think that goes into your credibility as a person and how to do your own work. Like you have at least tried to figure something out, or at least identify what's wrong. Than to just bitch it out and like, well, that's off of my hands now. It's not my problem.
Yeah, as a lead, you if your people keep coming to you, here's the problem. Okay, well, do you have a path forward? Like, what have you done so far to resolve what it is? Have you tried anything yet? What's no, I haven't done anything. Well, why
not?
Why am I employing you then?
Yeah, why are you here?
Why are you here? If I
Because
have
you're not
to go,
doing your job.
right, if I have to go make all the decisions for you, I might as well get rid of you and do it myself.
Right.
You know.
And then someone will actually do that. They go, okay, bet. I'm like, you're missing the point here, friend. Like the point is that like I want you guys to be active
Self-sufficient.
Yeah. You know, completed staff work for a lot of you listeners out there. It's a thing. Look it up.
Yeah. I mean, troubleshooting, I know for my industry, whenever there's any small issue like, oh, I'm not getting what I should out of the speaker or whatever, it's all troubleshooting. And if you're not willing to do that, in at least my role, and I'm sure your guys' role as well, then there's really no point of you being there.
Yeah,
right?
You're just sucking up all the good air. You're wasting space. You know
Yeah,
what I mean?
exactly.
Right.
You're getting a paycheck the same as me, but I'm doing 3 times the amount of work as you, and that's just pissing me off.
Exactly.
Like your existence then at that point pisses me off.
You are an inconvenience to me.
Right.
Yeah.
Your value like minus, you know,
In my way. Yeah.
Closing thoughts, MVP.
We've all done Shady Fixes. We all will probably continue to do Shady Fixes to a certain degree. Just be smart about it. Don't do anything that would compromise the integrity of that component and could cause loss of life. But also, you know, when you're out there working, you got to look out for yourself. So if somebody's trying to get you to do a shady fix and it just seems way far left field, pump the brakes on it and just kind of throw up that red flag. Yeah, you probably get a lot of flack for it, and you might even lose your job depending on the organization you work for. But at the end of the day, you still have a license that you can take to another place that will value you and not put you in that predicament. So just be smart.
I'll rephrase it in a way that that's been taught to me is like, don't be the senior person with a secret. Like if you know this fix is shady and you know it's a little questionable, don't keep it to yourself. Like run that up the ladder, let them make the call whether it needs to go any higher or there needs to be some kind of authority that needs to buy off on it. Just don't be that one person to end it all be all and then you be the one to shoulder all the blame if it goes south.
Maybe some guys do that because they think they're protecting their team. If shit goes sideways, I'm the only one who knew, so I'm the only one who could be held responsible. And maybe in their mind, they're thinking that I'm helping them by not telling them this, right? So you know, deniability, right?
Right.
Ignorance is bliss type thing.
Yeah.
They can't be held responsible for something they didn't know. But
again, like don't be the senior person with a secret. We like to thank all our patrons for helping us make this episode and all our episodes, really giving Shoreline a reason to continue making the show for us. We like to thank our patrons, Erica Lamont, Laura Mans, Mike Diltz, congrats on your baby, by the way, Ryan Freshour, Jenny Dignan, and Thomas Connolly. Thank you all so much for your patronage. Actually, all of you patrons, thank all of you for it. And it helps us maintain our gear, get newer stuff like these new car smell mics we have right now. Having our first official sponsor, which is Rockwell Time, Rockwell Watches. Rockwell Time makes outdoor watches and some fancy watches, sunglasses, safety-rated sunglasses too, and some snowboarding gear. They also make stuff for veterans and for other people of service like firefighters and nurses and doctors. Visit rockwelltime.com. Use the code CX, the number 4 MX. That's Charlie X-Ray, the number 4, Mike X-Ray. Use that code, save 20% off your next purchase. Check out our merch at cancelformaintenance.com. And then again, support us on Patreon.
bye, everybody.